Well, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. Really excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the webinar by the Global Alliance for Medical Education, put on by the Futures and Innovation Committee. Really excited to talk about how generative AI, how can we apply generative AI in the medical education context. Before we get started, I really want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank, by the way, my name is Aaron Johnson. I'm the co-chair of the Futures Innovation Committee. But I really want to thank my co-chair, David Pollard, who can't be with here today. Did an amazing job helping put together this webinar. Also want to thank the Futures Innovation Committee as a whole. Really did a great job trying to put everything together for this. And thank you to you all, because without you all, this wouldn't have happened. So really thank you, and I hope we can give you an engaging and exciting presentation. Hopefully, at the end of the presentation or the webinar, you'll be able to describe exactly what is generative AI, how it's currently being utilized in medical education, and how are we going to situate it in that medical education context. We have a lot of experts today, and really excited to have you hear from them. With that being said, I actually want to turn it over to our Madam President, Eva Thalman, for a couple of words.
Yeah, hello everybody. Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining us. This is another very important webinar from the Global Alliance for Medical Education. And it is all about innovation and the future, again, in medical education. And for this, actually, a topic like generative artificial intelligence in medical education, of course, is very interesting. I think we all know it, know the buzzwords, and we all think, how can we actually include generative artificial intelligence in our daily work? And I really hope that we will give a few answers, and I'm super excited actually to have a wonderful faculty here who is going to discuss with Aaron, with Aaron today, who is the chair of this webinar. I would like to really thank the Future and Innovation Committee, Aaron, whom you just met, actually, and David Pollard are the co-chairs. And you also see here the group of people who are working on a weekly basis to put this program together. I just want to remind everybody, the Global Alliance for Medical Education, we are a non-for-profit organization, and all of the colleagues who are helping in the programs are volunteers, and they do it beyond and above their normal work. So thank you very much. So what we would like to ask you is, as always in our webinars, please let's have an open discussion. This means we are really interested to get questions in. We are interested to get comments in. We are interested if you can use the smiley function to send us smileys or thumbs up or whatever reactions. Yeah, we are really, really interested in also hearing you as delegates on this webinar. And I would like to open the discussion with a question to you. And what we are really very interested is, why are you at this webinar? What is interesting for you in generative artificial intelligence and in medical education? So just send us a few, comments in. It would be absolutely great. Yeah. I think that we also have a polling question, right, Dale? Not quite sure. Maybe not. But
we do. Rich, would you bring that up?
Yes. So this is the polling question, yeah, because we are always interested of who is actually in the webinars, and we would like to know to which stakeholder group do you belong or you identify with. So if you just could click on, it activates us all a little bit. It gives us a kick on the other side to really look of who you are and who is actually joining today. So with this, actually, I would love to turn it back to Aaron, who is chairing the first part of the meeting. And I hope, and I'm really already excited to listen of what we will hear.
Thanks so much, Eva. I was just looking at the results. So it's like 47% is from the medical education, but it looks like we have good representation from everybody. So definitely I think it's going to be a very engaging conversation. But with that being said, I'm really excited to introduce our keynote speaker today, Mr. Matt Lewis. Mr. Lewis leads the augmented intelligence function across Inizio Medical. With 25 years of life science experience, Mr. Lewis specializes in partnering with key stakeholders to speed time to decision, leveraging artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, digital innovation, and bespoke consultancy. He has deep expertise in oncology, hematology, neuropsychiatry, and rare disorders, and has contributed to the launch of over 60 treatments globally. Matt co-chairs the AI task force at the International Society for Medical Publication Professionals, where he oversaw the development and publication of the global roadmap and call to action on artificial intelligence, which was published on November 1st. He co-authored the Declarative Statement on Artificial Intelligence for the Healthcare Communications Association, published in early October, and was a featured speaker in 2023 for the Medical Affairs Professional Society Executive Consortium on Augmented Intelligence. Also helped architect this generative AI white paper published on September 28th. Mr. Lewis is a founding board member of the Society for Artificial Intelligence and Health and is executive lead for Inizio Medical's Business Employee Research Group on mental health and well-being. Mr. Lewis, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks everyone for the time and for being here today. It's really a pleasure. Let me see if I can pull my slides up and just jump right into it. Let's see. Okay, up. All right, I'm gonna assume that the slides are in view mode and everyone can see them. All right, so we're gonna just kind of dive right into the generative AI pond, if that's okay, talking specifically about how it applies to medical education. I'll start by sharing a little bit about myself. I see a ton of friendly names and on the list of participants, and that's just so great to see. I've spoken with some of you leading up to this conversation in advance. Thank you so much for the thoughts and consideration and deep ideas of where this might apply. And for those of you that I haven't spoken with in some time, definitely looking forward to catching up soon. So just a little bit about me. I am a partner in Inizio. I have equity interest in the firm. I'm also a minority shareholder in a couple of other startups that I advise on the side. But everything I'm going to say here over the next 20-25 minutes or so are my comments, mine alone. They've not been officially endorsed by Inizio or any other firm in which I either do or do not have equity positions, and have not been reviewed by anyone prior to this discussion, but hopefully represent a good perspective on where generative AI is, both within medical and specifically where it is within medical education. So some of you do know me. We've worked together for a long time. Some of you don't. I've been in this space my entire career, about 26 years or so. I've been in medical education for 24 of those 26 years. I've been a speaker at the Alliance meetings. I've been a workshop facilitator. I've published multiple articles and posters in CME, in publications, in field medical. I have a background and a deep focus in health services research, and almost finished my doctoral degree in medical education. I have done a lot of work in the space broadly in medical education to kind of help think about outcomes and analytics and the rest. I started a medical affairs consultancy about 8 years ago that is now the largest in the space. And as Aaron was saying, lead a lot of the professional societies' considerations on what generative AI is, should be, and will be in the near term. And it's that where we'll kind of focus over the next couple of minutes. Just a little bit about Inizio so you kind of understand where we are as an organization. Inizio is now the largest life sciences communications and consulting firm on the planet. We partner with all the top life sciences firms in the kind of ecosystem, if you will, whether that's pharmaceuticals, biotech, medical device, or software as a medical device, including in medical education through our medical division. Saying hello to our Inizio colleagues that are on the line as well that are participating in this discussion. Okay, so just enough about me, focusing the rest of the time on generative AI and this idea of what we call augmented intelligence, or kind of augmented intelligence as powered by generative AI, because generative AI is really robust, but it's what it allows to be possible that's really what matters. So augmented intelligence is a concept that has been around for a very long time, for over a decade. Gartner, one of the leading consultancies, has this definition of augmented intelligence where they describe it as a design pattern for human-centered partnership of people and AI working together to enhance cognitive performance, speeding things like learning, vis-a-vis education, decision-making, and new experiences. There is no room in this model for an autonomous AI, for the reference of a kind of a bot or some kind of independent actor, if you will, of AI to kind of go in and make decisions or kind of take over a consideration for a learner or for a system. It is only AI or intelligence amplification acting to help speed time to decision for clinicians, for patients, for professionals, for humans, for our friends, our family, those with whom we work, working together to create synergy. There's no place where AI works on its own. It only works well when it works together with people to create something that either can't do alone. That is it. So in this idea of augmented intelligence, this is kind of the classical example of where augmented intelligence was first demonstrated to be effective. There is this consideration where humans are intricate to seeing augmented intelligence work and work well throughout. It is not this idea, again, that you create an AI kind of system or platform and then kind of let it loose in the environment and see what happens, or have to kind of hold your breath and check to see whether or not it's right or accurate or valid or appropriate or compliant. None of those things, because the humans are never leaving the interaction as AI is stood up. Humans developed the software, the AI software. They leverage their subject matter expertise in the realm of medical education. That could be considered a physician, a patient, a medical writer, a strategist, someone that's leveraging their key opinion leader kind of considerations, if you will. And then humans are then interpreting what comes out to speed time to decision and improve outcomes. So the way to think about this might be that humans are both the alpha and the omega in augmented intelligence. They start and end the process, and they are intricate to it being seen through to success. The example on the bottom comes from a study where initially AI was used to detect lymph node cancer cells, and the error rate is about 7.5% in this study, whereas human pathologists were better. They had about a 3.5% error rate, a little better than the AI. But when you mush the two together and mash them up, and use both AI and pathologists together, the error rate drops to about 0.5% overall. That is, the two working together are synergistic. This is the example of what synergy looks like, what augmented intelligence can be. AI is pretty good by itself. It's not as good as humans, but it's a lot more efficient and a lot cheaper. And then humans are pretty good, usually better than what AI can do, but typically more expensive. And then when you add the two together, the outcome is significantly better than either can do on their own. And it does create synergy. And it is that synergy, that 1 + 1 = 3, that we're after with everything that is possible with augmented intelligence. And augmented intelligence, while it has been around for a really long time as a concept, it's only really been possible, achievable, implementable with generative AI, and really only for about a year since ChatGPT, almost exactly a year ago now. So what is generative AI? We've been hearing about it for a long time. People talk about it, sometimes correctly, sometimes otherwise. It is a subset of artificial intelligence, and it's been around for quite some time, only really kind of demonstrated to the populace in a kind of citizen-oriented, democratized fashion through ChatGPT as a subset of deep learning, which itself is a subset of machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. And we've been using AI, everyone's been using AI for over a decade. When you think about our consumer applications, whether it's like Netflix or Amazon or Waze or other things we use in our daily life, most of the things we do that makes a recommendation to do something in our actual human lives are already powered by machine learning or some other form of artificial intelligence. It's not like, all of a sudden we're just introducing artificial intelligence for the first time and now it's like we have to try to learn it from scratch. No, we've been using machine learning and AI for quite some time. It's this form of AI, this generative AI, that's a little bit novel that we have to try to figure out how to incorporate it into our environments. But we've been using AI systemically, both in the consumer environment as well as in the professional one for quite some time. The thing that makes generative AI a bit distinct, though, is how it works and what it does. So it's not like search or Google or Bing or anything else you do like that on steroids. I hear people talk about that all the time. It's not like that at all. It's not like going into Excel or another kind of spreadsheet that you might use and trying to kind of find the thing you've already put in there and get it back out, so to speak. The way that generative works is that it's trained on a large corpus of content, And what the content is might differ depending upon the specific large language model that's being stood up. It could be a common crawl across the web. It could be Wikipedia. It could be, you know, unpublished books. It could be videos or movies. It really doesn't actually matter what it's trained on, because it's trying to learn what might be useful in a different situation than the one that it's trained on. For those of you that have a adult learning background, this equivalent situation might be called far transfer. The computer scientists call it zero shot learning. Zero shot learning in generative AI is when you train a large language model on a large corpus of content, and then it figures out how to do something new that it never was taught to do in the first place. This is what makes generative brilliant. It's not rescuing or retrieving existing content from a spreadsheet the way that Google search does, where it just retrieves existing content. Generative literally creates something novel that never existed before by learning about a new context from one it was trained on differently. That zero shot experience is completely novel and had not existed previous to, say, ChatGPT about a year ago. The other really novel thing about generative AI versus, say, other models like machine learning and the rest that existed before is that you generally don't need a team of doctoral machine learning scientists to interface with the model. You can just use English language to prompt, that is, ask questions or make requests of the model, and then get outputs from the model also in natural language. You don't need to know how to code in Python. You don't need to have a doctoral degree in data science, and be able to just talk to the language, talk to the model in natural language. You can get responses that are either text-based, that are images, that are music, that are code, that are actions. It's like you become a computer programmer, or it's like you become an artist, a designer, a medical writer, a musician, automatically, just because all that stuff is baked into the model, and it can create all those new types of content automatically because it's applying that type of far transfer, essentially. So as a result, because this is so amazing, it is so robust, it is so brilliant, it's been able to do some quite significant things in the last 6, 9, 12 months. There are a number of controlled experiments that exist across both the US and Europe about applying generative in a number of different contexts, especially in the professional setting and academic settings. And you're already starting to see from a productivity perspective that generative improvement in productivity is somewhere between 30 and 80% in performance improvement for things like using computer code or writing or marketing or developing business materials. That is, without generative, it's like a baseline, or X, if you will. With generative, it's 130 to 180% better, faster, stronger with generative. The equivalent is when the steam engine was first introduced in the late 1870s, steam engine increased productivity by about 17%. So generative is somewhere between 2 and 8 times more robust than the introduction of the steam engine on the populace. So what this means in our environment, in the medical education space specifically, is that if you can use this kind of zero shot far transfer consideration to help ideate, consider, think about, develop, refine, test, implement, if you will, the considerations from content without augmented intelligence are that we spend a lot of time developing content. We take raw content, we take it to suppliers, which might be medical education companies, could be pharmaceutical companies, could be physicians, and we create content. That's primarily what a lot of our groups do. We create a tremendous amount of content to try to think about the right way to address a particular learning problem. But as augmented intelligence gets stood up and we see more of what's possible, and the cost of creating content comes down because generative can now play an augmented role with our staff, with our humans, if you will, you're going to start seeing this curve kind of shift down and to the right, if you will. People will still create content for sure, but the cost of creating content will lower, it will decrease. It's not going to decrease to zero, but it will definitely become cheaper to create content for sure, 100%. You're already seeing it in many settings, like in most of the broader economy. It's becoming much cheaper to create ads, much cheaper to produce publications, because with generative helping to kind of amplify or extend the capabilities of the human mind, it then makes it a lot easier to create content that's relevant for multiple audiences. And as a result, then the supply chain, this digital content supply chain that we need to get to, say, clinicians, to experts, to researchers, to patients, to other stakeholders, will start to become more focused on things like, how do we actually get the right content to the right clinician at the right point in time so they make the right decision, so it leads to someone that's suffering from a disease that could possibly have a better quality of life or improve their outcomes for a more persistent period of time? Or how do we improve the customer experience? Or how do we surface actual insights? And these are conversations that are already happening today. So this is a quote I was asked folks to take a look at for a moment that kind of talks about the kind of coming change with regards to content broadly, not specifically to medical education, but broadly as a result of augmented intelligence. Just maybe take a 10 seconds to just read this for a moment. So this comes from a book called I, Human, like, if you've ever seen iRobot, which talks a little bit about what it means to be uniquely human in the age of artificial intelligence. And the quote is that along the lines that the cost of creating content is rapidly approaching zero and will be near zero in the near future. But as content creation is kind of considered an approaching commodity, if you will, how we leverage content and how we ensure that it gets to a place where people can make decisions from it will be the kind of emerging expertise that's necessary in the world to come, and what is considered competence. So competence will be less a matter of kind of memorizing things and being like a master of a really deep area of expertise, and more about how do we get content to the right person so they make the right decision and hopefully speed time to outcomes. This statement is not an Inizio statement. It's not a statement that that I've come up with myself. I wish I had, but I didn't. It is something that ISMAP has said. It's something that the American Medical Association has said, that the American Architects Association has said, engineering associations have said it. Pretty much every professional society in America and in Europe has said some version of this, that in the near future, augmentation will replace humans working alone. That is, augmented humans will win in the future. Humans partnering with or directing artificial intelligence will be more effective in almost every category where cognitive labor, that is like thinking, creating, ideating, developing content, or creative labor like designing, developing images and the rest is involved, or better than AI alone. That is like the synergy of humans and AI working together will be better, stronger, faster, more effective than either humans or AI alone in almost every category. And almost every professional society has indicated that this is the near-term goal of ensuring that their professional class can adopt augmented intelligence and be capable and future-proofed against an environment where doing either human alone or AI alone in the future will not be sufficient to be relevant and to be kind of future ready. And how do we prepare, upskill, reskill our colleagues to ensure that there is still relevance in the world to come? So what does augmented intelligence mean for medical? What does it mean for medical education? It is all over the news. I'm sure I don't have to tell you this. You probably see it in your own daily lives. You see it on LinkedIn headlines. You see it in your personal feeds and social media. You see it, from your professional societies, from your clients, et cetera, et cetera. Everywhere you look, there's a headline talking about generative AI doing something, whether it's around, ChatGPT either being banned or being considered, med tech or pharma using it to develop new drugs or, advanced considerations with the FDA. On the medical education side, the same thing with publication, same thing with field medical, same thing with every branch of medical affairs. There are multiple studies already published now looking at the use of generative artificial intelligence, large language models, to advance considerations, not just theoretically, but practically, to improve the way that we work in the space across every discipline. And the fact that there are papers published in November of 2023 means that this work was actually done in May of 2023, which means people started doing it in December, January of late last year. So just think what people are actually doing now that's going to be published 4 or 5 months from now. The field is progressing rapidly. There's a tremendous amount of activity in this space. Just to give you a couple of ideas of what is being published right now, the example on the left where the purple is indicated talks about the use of generative AI to answer questions for physicians. So the general kind of conventional wisdom was that up until like the introduction of ChatGPT, that physicians always defaulted to wanting to get answers from other physicians, their peers, from key opinion leaders, from subject matter experts, rather than going to like a chatbot for an answer. But in the middle of this year, that kind of switched a little bit. And there's this publication that came out that the chief clinical officer from Google Health, Michael Howell, commented on in a JAMA AI article in May, where he said that coming in about May, June, most physicians actually preferred getting an answer on a clinical question, not from a peer, not from a key opinion leader, not from a subject matter expert, but actually from a chatbot, in their case, Bard, the Google Generative AI platform, versus getting it from a peer. And that was the first time really in history that the pendulum has kind of switched over to getting answers from generative versus getting it from a peer. And their implication wasn't that like we should replace doctors with generative, certainly not. It was more that this augmentation principle, the idea that you could use generative AI to supplement, complement, and enhance and augment what doctors do is now upon us. And that there are many situations like physician burnout or in the ER or in lots of situations where physicians could potentially be complemented by generative AI, where at least it's at the same level that physicians expect of a peer. And it would be almost like, incumbent upon us to think about where this would be worthwhile. The right side of this slide is the equivalent consideration, a paper that was published in April of this year, looking at the patient interpretations of content from a chatbot versus a physician. And similarly, there's always been a concern that patients would prefer getting answers to clinical questions from physicians versus getting it from patients. Getting it from a chatbot. In the earlier part of this year, that also kind of switched, where most patients, at least in the US, are starting to prefer getting answers from generative AI, either from a platform, a direct platform like Bard or ChatGPT or AskPi or something like that, or something coming from one of their hospitals. And there's a lot of commentary about this as to why this might be the case, but some of the discussion might be that in a lot of US ambulatory care settings, if you go see your primary care doctor or you see another type of physician, the actual interaction is quite constrained. Like the physician's spending most of their time with the EMR system, they're typing information into a chart, they're not really spending time with the person in the visit. So the type of conversation they're having with the chatbot actually is, at least in the patient's eyes, more empathic than what they might get from their actual human doctor. And as a result, these types of analyses are starting to kind of skew a little bit more towards the chatbot than they do towards the physician. But again, I think it's indicating, again, not that the generative suggestion or generative platform should replace the physician, but at least that there's some parity going on, and there might be some considerations of augmentation to follow. So there's something to think about as things progress forward. So just in terms of what's going on in the broader space, every major professional society in the environment has now issued a call to action for AI adoption, indicating a couple things. One, this is not a trend. It is not a fad. It's not like blockchain. It's not like the metaverse. It's not like every kind of other trend that's existed over the last 10, 12 years. This is the kind of transformative innovation of our careers. It will shift as an inflection point before and after what changes as a result. And every major group has kind of stood up a call to action or a roadmap as to what to do as a result, whether it's HCA in the UK, MAPS in the US, ISMAP, very other groups as well. I was just on the phone yesterday with the medical writers associations in the US and Europe, and they're sending up similar guidelines as well. So every group is adopting a disposition to say this matters and we should change how we work and what we do now, because it will change essentially what our careers and our jobs look like in the near future. So what does this mean for medical education? I think I've kind of been leading to this, but I want to just be really clear and unequivocal about this. It is not a tactic. It is not like you just kind of juxtapose a little bit of generative, like sprinkle on a little bit of generative AI on top of an existing program and we're done. No, it is transformative. Augmented intelligence will transform medical education. It will touch every part of medical education, of continuing professional development, of everything we do, both in GME and in CME will be touched by generative AI. From on top, what should we teach? Who should we teach it to? Did we learn it? How do we know? All those things will be touched by and influenced by generative AI. From how do we conduct a needs assessment? What are the proposal that we're putting forward to a sponsor, a supporter? Can we quickly develop an executive summary using generative? And yes, we can. It's already being done. Who is the audience? How do we customize learning objectives for them? Not just Bloom's taxonomy, but beyond that, what do they actually learn? Far transfer, near transfer, and they go back into their audience, into their environment. How do we engage them in a more kind of directed fashion? There are a number of really compelling ways to approach this from a questions development perspective, personalizations. I know Brian McGowan's on the line. He's done a lot of really leading work in this space, indicating what's possible in this environment, and as well as other considerations just in terms of outcomes, assessment, capture, interpretation in a democratized fashion. The work that the broader groups have done with outcomes is really wonderful, but there's a lot that can be done in platform in data analysis and visualization that does not require either an advanced degree in data science or a coding background. Then there are three main categories I think that all teams should really consider with regards to generative. The first is just about the kind of back office internal operations of running a business that does medical education. I would call that working smarter. This is how you talk to other people, other humans. Anytime you talk to another person, we would call it interprofessional communication. There is an opportunity for something to go wrong if you're talking to another person. And there are ways of improving your communication using generative, multiple ways, both in terms of making sure that what you're saying is aligned to expectation, practicing the communication, actually writing a shorter communication, testing it, sending it out, getting an A/B test, if you will. Lots of ways of improving communication. Project management, process management, and then making sure you're spending time on the right things, priority management. All those things can be done today with current tech in generative. If there was a real pause on generative, it never existed past today to evolve past its current point of development. We just had today's AI for the rest of our career. All of this could be done today. It is being done today. The middle piece around developing smarter content, this is really taking what we have and amplifying the ability to develop learning that our learners hopefully respond to and change their behavior. We can do a lot of summarization, extractive and abstractive summarizations, taking 80-page PDFs and making them intelligible, because no one has the time to read nearly as much content as is happening out there in the world. We can segment audiences and learners, customize learning to individual learners. If you have an audience of 1 million internists across the US, how do you develop learning for each one of them individually? You can do that now with generative. Synthetic media, building avatars or taking text and developing it into audio. You may not be able to get someone into a green screen or get them into a room every time to film them. It doesn't mean you can't get their likeness or their voice or their narrative into every corner of the world automatically within a two-week period. You can do that, and we are doing it now. And then actual real omnichannel is already being done with generative, both within our sector as well as externally. And then on the right side, learning smarter, there's a lot of consideration already about, it's already past the point. Medical knowledge is changing so quickly. You can't expect people to master and memorize what's happening in most of the major spaces that exist, not in cancer, not in hematology, not in rare disease, not in neuropsych. It's just not possible. So how do you think about this idea of extending a second brain and making people more contextually aware than kind of mastering content? There's a lot that can be done with regards to simulation. I mentioned learning transfer before, and then there's an emerging science around sentiment and affect, about spending more time on kind of the affective parts of learning and less on cognition. So there's a tremendous amount that can be done with regards to medical education. I think the place to start is thinking about the challenges or problems that the organization faces or that you're trying to solve for, and then think about how to juxtapose an AI consideration to extend that forward, not trying to kind of find a nail if you only have a hammer. But just as a reminder, AI will transform medical education, just like it'll transform every other part of medical, but it's not autonomous. It requires human partners to make it effective and to create that synergy that I talked about earlier. These images come directly from generative platforms, from Midjourney and Firefly. They're stamped as such. You have to kind of demonstrate that provenance whenever you're using an AI system. Our lead designer built these images for me. And they're meant to indicate that when you work as a human in an environment that AI is part of, it is a partnership, and you are working as a kind of collaborative thought partner with AI. It's not a tool, but it's something to consider. And it's really worthwhile to kind of think about like what role the human has, what role the organization has. We've set up a consistent kind of security protocol to ensure that the applications that we utilize are well considered before they go forward to sponsor or for a third-party organization, but every organization is going to kind of adapt or adopt their own kind of principles as to how they want to work. But it's important that we consider the transparency and the governance and the compliance and the ethics, because it's not the easiest thing to just kind of pick something off the shelf and kind of decide whether or not it's appropriate. Just two closing stances. I see the hook coming, so I'll end quickly. I'll say that, you know, that it's unlike previous technologies and things that have been out there in the world, that the best advice I can give is that practice really does make perfect. I would suggest that at work, really just listen to your colleagues and teams, find a couple of things that people just really loathe doing, the things that people hate doing all the time that are really difficult or arduous or mundane that they have to do over and over again that are really frustrating. Anything that has a lot of friction makes for a great target for generative AI. At home, it's the same thing. The things that you really love to do, that you have time to do, it could be music, it could be sports, whatever it is, go into your favorite platform and figure out how to use generative for that, or what generative is already doing for that. And then try to apply those same types of learning in the work environment. That experience trends directly into how it applies in medical education. That's how everyone gets involved. What is likely to happen, what is already happening in the environment, this is my last slide, is that as augmented intelligence gets more familiar to groups, you move along this kind of maturity curve. So, you know, on the left side, groups kind of become aware, they see what's possible, they initiate something either in their personal life or in their professional environment, they try some things out, they begin learning as they move from left to right, they start experimenting, you know, with their groups and see what's possible, they begin implementing with a supporter, with a learning environment, and after a number of those experiences, they begin to really transform their environment. And then the new organization is AI powered. It's not, again, a tactic. It's been fully transformed. And this ball is kind of rolling down the hill, so to speak. So that's my last slide. I think it's a great space to be in. We're seeing, you know, really kind of widespread kind of change across the field, but happy to take any questions or turn it back to Aaron is probably more appropriate. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis. That was an amazing presentation, and I actually have a couple of questions that I'm going to read there in the Q&A. If you can answer them in about 30 seconds or less, that would be great. Matt, what are your thoughts of the automation bias or automation-induced complacency with AI and impact on clinical decision-making with healthcare providers, as per many studies are emerging?
Yeah, I mean, everything in the space is very nuanced, and there's no like easy answer for anything. I think everything's kind of like a double-edged sword. There is a tendency with the stand-up of these types of systems for groups that have especially a lower level of expertise or experience to default to their use, and then as a result lower their own confidence. And then either erode a lower level of skills or never to actually develop that initial skill set that helps to scaffold or kind of grow and progress forward. And we see that not just in the clinical setting, but in agency settings or medical education environments. Like graphic designers start using generative platforms, then never learn how to storyboard. So it is definitely a danger. That being said, I think there are also considerations that there are a lot of studies that suggest that humans actually are more likely to use generative AI platforms if they don't know how they work, but are confident that the people putting them in place have their interests at heart and are trying to improve and support their work and their jobs. So it's like a little bit of a trade-off. You have to, you know, look for systems that support the work and support the outcomes, but are not, you know, eroding kind of the core competencies of the profession or the roles in place. And it is difficult. It's not, like I said, you can't just go into an organization, sprinkle a little bit of, you know, generative AI and hope that it works well.
Awesome. I'm only going to take one more question. Hello, Matt. I'm interested in hearing your perspective on the use of AI detection technologies. Many companies are now implementing these tools to identify and mitigate the spread of AI-generated content.
Yeah, it's like a whole market now, this AI detection kind of industry, if you will. Generally speaking, the companies that support the platforms like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and OpenAI and Baidu and X, Twitter, none of them are of the opinion that the detection tools, if you will, are useful or efficacious. You know, they all at the most can detect only maybe 30% of AI generated content. And now there's a whole kind of like counter industry of platforms that can be used to kind of get around the detection. So I don't think that's a very kind of reasonable kind of path for most groups to consider. I think it's probably better to think about augmentation and think about the types of situations where we want humans to retain ownership and provenance, and where we're not going to allow any type of AI into the consideration. Like, for example, journal articles. AI cannot be an author. If you write a journal article with AI, you have to disclose it, and it's possible that it might be rejected. Whereas there might be a lot of content in our environment where it would be quite helpful to have AI as a partner, and we should just allow that and just disclose it. To have this kind of middle ground where we try to exclude it, but the tools that don't actually work, it just creates a lot of busy work for people with no real goal, no real outcome, if you will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If anybody has more questions for Matt, I'm not saying you have to stick around, but maybe try to type them in the chat so that we can move on to the next set of panelists. But Matt, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so now we're going to transition, and I'm going to bring in Daniel Guinea. He's going to be moderating the panel discussion. He's also part of the Futures Innovation Committee. So Daniel, please take over.
Great, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. This is super exciting. Hold on, I got a message in front of my screen that I need to move out of the way. Super excited to be here for this discussion. I think the opportunity to have met Louis as our keynote was really enlightening, and I think there's probably a wide range, and based on the survey too that we opened with, there's a wide range of folks in different places in their understanding and application of generative AI within medical education and continuing professional development. So this is, I think you'll find this panel discussion very enlightening. So I'm with Platform Q Health Education. I've been in the continuing education, continuing professional development space for, wow, about 25 years. And prior to that, I was actually an educator in secondary school for science. So have been involved in education for my professional career. But I host this panel today, not as an expert, but as someone wanting to learn, someone wanting to be able to learn from those, from the experts who are with us. So I'm going to introduce our panelists now. And hopefully this, again, will be an engaging discussion. And I would ask, please submit questions in the Q&A box, as we will be taking some time after the panel discussion to have an more open discussion. So I think we'll start with Dr. Dale Coomerly. Dale is Executive Director of GAME and has been involved in medical education his entire career. Started off as a professor of pharmacy at Nova Southeastern University, and then spent 10 plus years as director of independent medical education at BMS and in the pharmaceutical industry. He's supported, and he's been an active supporter of inclusion of generative AI into medical education since at least 2016. And on a personal note, Dale and I have had a number of interesting conversations just about technology and application and point of singularity, or with comes for, so a lot of conversations around this, but Dale's been very engaged in this for his career. Eleftherios Soleas, otherwise known to his friends, as he says, as Terry, is also on our panel. Terry's Director of Continuing Professional Development in the Faculty of Health Sciences at Queen's University. He's in the Office of Professional Development and Education Scholarship, and he's adjunct faculty in health sciences and education. His role places him as primary developer and accreditor of CPD for the faculty, and he's the educational lead for his home department. Currently, he serves on the university and national committees, lending his educational, psychological, and accreditation perspectives. So, Terry, happy to have you as part of the panel.
Thanks so much for having me.
Kimberly Sears is, let's see, I got to find there it is. Dr. Also at Queen's University, conducts an active program of research and health services with a focus on advancing quality of care. The majority of Dr. Sears' work focuses on furthering the quality and safety of medication delivery She explores the advancement of medication delivery in Canada and internationally, including both the community and hospital settings for children and adults. And currently, Kim is Senior Nursing Reviewer for the Canadian Strategic Clinical Innovation Network's AI in Healthcare Curriculum. And then finally, David Wolfe joins us from Lynn University College of Business in Boca Raton, Florida. He's the Professor and Program Coordinator for Healthcare Management. He's got a foundational background in accounting and finance, and is nationally recognized on long-term care operations and improvement. Dr. Wolfe's been a healthcare entrepreneur. He's got scholarly contributions that focus on healthcare quality improvement and care transition, and he's even helped develop the care transition protocols currently adopted by over half of U.S. long-term care facilities, and has actively published as well. So we're excited to have our panelists here today. I will, before we get started though, would like to ask you to take part in a second poll, just to again get an idea of kind of where we are or where we're applying or how we're understanding generative AI. Okay, so here's the poll. Yeah, pretty simple. Just what's your experience with generative artificial intelligence? And when we get a chance to see the responses, this will just help us in our panel discussion. So to kind of understand where you are as participants, and then again in the Q&A portion to follow, we'll be happy to answer questions and even encourage participation.
Looks like we have a pretty even spread, I'd say.
Yeah, this is great to know. So yeah, hopefully, again, as the panelists, as you look through this, briefly, you see that, maybe 1 out of every 5 folks says they have no experience, but then it goes all the way up to, folks who are huge fans and accessing generative AI for work and home. So a pretty even spread among our participants. Thanks for that. So we'll get started. What we want to do with this discussion is just allow each of the panelists to kind of speak for a few minutes on kind of their area of focus and expertise. And then we'll have some conversation or maybe some directed questions. But we'll start with Dr. Sears, if that's all right with you, Kim.
Sure.
And her focus is speaking about the use of AI within interprofessional teams through practice, education, and research lens, and with some practical examples. So Kim, kind of set the stage for us.
Yeah, so I would say some of the challenges, and it brings us back to our keynote speaker, which was great. Thank you so much. Is that we're very siloed in our educational approaches. And so the problem with silos is we're hiring experts from clinical backgrounds to come in and teach the clinical skills, but often they're not aware of AI, and they're teaching things that have been taught for years, and they're teaching the way they've been taught, and they're not challenging to think outside the box of where do we need to go, where's content going to be, and where's the future of health education. They're teaching what they know, and it's not that they're not trying their best. Obviously, most people have clinical practices going. They're trying to do research. They're trying to do teaching. They have very busy schedules. They're trying to do the best they can do for the students. But a lot of times their toolbox doesn't have the right skill set, just because partially they're not aware, but culture is, this is the content that's always been taught. This is what we want you to teach. And like Matt Lewis mentioned, it's not memorization that's needed anymore. And yet we're still doing a lot of that in our programs. So this siloed approach really has not helped us. We need to work more interprofessionally. And I can give you an example from an education perspective. We run a graduate program, and we had one student who came in without a healthcare background. She was an IT expert, an engineer. And she said to me the first day, I feel really out of my realm here, and I'm not sure I'm the right person for this course. I said, you know what, just give it the week and see. And the next day I touched base with her, and it was her input that all the medical health professionals really wanted to know, because those are the skills they wanted to gather. And it was a really great melding of different educations. And I think we have opportunities on university campuses and college campuses to work more collaboratively across faculties and to really look at what skills students need. If we look at the healthcare work practice setting that we're putting people into, we know that the practice setting needs people who are ready to work, and they don't really have a lot of time for learners. We know that the data told us that by 2030, we were going to be 10 million healthcare professionals short worldwide. And this was pre-COVID. So we know that those numbers have advanced. We know that people are tired. They're doing the best they can do, but we really need to support the practice. And we noticed that in practice, a lot of our systems are dysfunctional. So for example, you might have to look on one computer system to look at the medications a patient's on. Charting might be in a different system. You're not talking to community settings in the same system, in Canada at least. And so it's very dysfunctional, and people are trying to navigate people safely through our healthcare systems rather than having error-free systems that help us do our job more effectively. And I think we need to give people these skills because the practice setting is going to change. It has to change. We cannot keep giving healthcare or delivering healthcare the same way we always have, because we're not going to have the people. The systems aren't effective. We don't have the costs in our system to keep going the way we are. We need to come up with more creative approaches, and that's what's required. When I look at where we, from a research perspective, where AI can take us, I think about the work I've done on medication safety. My doctoral work, I looked at 372 error and near miss reports in 3 children's hospitals across Canada, and I was trying to find contributing factors and ways to make the healthcare environment safer so that nurses didn't create errors and that patients weren't harmed. And I tried to do this, and now I think about work I'm currently doing. I'm working with a group, international group, and we're looking at large data sets that have hundreds of thousands of errors and near misses, and we're using generative AI to actually look at the contributing factors and predictive factors and factors that cause more harm. What times of day, what factors in the community pharmacies can lead to more high-risk errors, to try and map ways to come up with really solid solutions. And I think, when I think about all the hours it took me to look at 372 error reports, and I think what generative AI can do, it's amazing. Another study I'm involved with is looking at implementing triage bot supporting systems. So how can a bot system go along with a triage nurse and actually make sure that they're coding the patients correctly, that they're looking at the right level of severity? And I think, the work that we looked at through Matt's talk earlier was looking at, really decreasing error risks because of humans and machine learning working together. And I think some of these studies that I'm currently involved in have a really great opportunity to advance practice and education and make the system safer and have better patient outcomes. And that's what I think we're all about from a medical perspective. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, that's fantastic, Kim. Thanks for those insights. And I think what I find compelling anyway, again, in my personal learning journey, is that, you seem to kind of be able to bridge the gap between, just medical training, let's say, medical education. Certainly you're working with nursing and other students, and I think you talk a lot about the interprofessional teams and the importance of that. But can you maybe describe a little bit, maybe where you see the application in terms of incorporating, and I think you just touched on it a bit, but being able to incorporate, the use of Gen AI in the continuing professional development space. So, obviously from a knowledge and competence standpoint, but also just in terms of developing as a professional. But can you talk to us at all about that?
Well, I would actually like to see a lot of this in our basic undergrad programs, but, we have to take some information out of those programs and look at where we really need to go and what skills our learners need to have to even put it in there. But from a continuing professional development, first we have to give people the skills. We have to show them what's possible and where they can take this learning. And I remember back in classrooms when we had MS Messenger, I think it was, and professors were all upset because we could hear dings of people talking in our rooms, and people were so upset. And now I think about ChatGPT. I mean, it's not going to go away. We need to learn how to use it properly. We need to incorporate that's a normal skill. I mean, when I was in my basic education, we didn't even have computers. I remember having a discussion with my family saying, do I buy a computer or a word processor? Because I wasn't sure what to buy. We've advanced now. Students know how to use phones way better than I ever will. And, you know, they just need the skills. They need to see the benefits of it. They need to understand how to use it, so that when we say people are practice ready, they're not just practice ready in a healthcare skill set, they're practice ready in the whole realm, which has an AI component and could move and advance our patient outcomes better than sitting and learning more medical terms for, you know, memorizing medical terms for months and months in courses.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. I appreciate those kind of insights. And I think a lot of the folks who are on today, you know, can really utilize that information or that knowledge, you know. And I think part of it too is, you know, how do you, in your role, in your position, get to that point of feeling like, yeah, I'm at a position where I can help educate folks how I can utilize this and I can incorporate Gen AI, you know, into what I'm doing. At least I know, you know, just on a personal level, that's kind of a hurdle, you know, like, gosh, do I know this well enough? And how do I practice? And how do I get to know it? I love your computer or word processor example, though, because I remember talking with my father, you know, about do we get a 256K or a 512K computer? You know, what's the best one to get, you know, to start with? So, you know, and we just had it.
They were outdated the day you bought it.
That they were, you know, but, you know, at some level, we just have to jump in, right? And, you know.
Yeah, and I think there's the basic knowledge people need, but there's the willingness to look at how to do things differently. And I think pushing people outside the box of what do our learners really need? Where does the healthcare system need to go? And how do we get people there to be ready to practice?
Okay, great, thanks. Well, we do have to move along. Looking at the time already, this is very engaging. But so David Wolfe, I think we'll jump next to you. And you know, just as an introduction, Dr. Wolfe's focus is really going to be to speak about using generative AI in the classroom from a teaching medical education perspective. So we'd love to hear what you're doing at Lynn University, Dr. Wolfe.
Thank you very much. This has really been phenomenal. That I think our keynote speaker touched on some very important points, and just some things that Kim just mentioned. You know, it brings back memories for me. I'm one of the old guys, and my dad worked for IBM for 40 years. And in 1983, when I graduated from Villanova University and I started working in my first nursing home, the president came into the office, in the accounting office, and he put down this big box, which was the original IBM PC that had a double disk drive, one that held the program and another one that held the data. And they were 8-inch, not even 5 1/4-inch floppies. These were 8-inch big disk drives. And that was, in my opinion, a fundamental paradigm shift that we saw. It was as big as the internet. It was as big as the telephone. And I also remember, again, unfortunately, being an old guy, the first TI calculator that came out. And I remember my dad from IBM saying, you are not allowed to use that to do your homework. I do not want you using that. I want you understanding the formulas. I want you memorizing the formulas. And that's the way the thinking was back then. And look at where we are today. Today, the calculator is in everybody's phone, and we don't need to worry about memorizing those things. And we are now at another major paradigm shift. And I've seen it at my university. My program lies within the College of Business and Management. And we have seen how students' learning is changing because of AI and because of generative AI. And I love the discussion about augmented AI. So let me tell you some of the things that we're looking at in my research and practical applications in our classroom. So number one, generative AI can produce very high quality medical text and summaries that can help students understand large amounts of data, narrative, much more quickly and efficiently than ever before. These models can also create simulated patient cases with specific medical histories and symptoms and lab results. And these synthetic cases, if you will, teach learners how to diagnose, treat, how to plan, ethical decision-making, clinical decision-making. We are at the precipice of, in my opinion, a major change as it relates to not just the educational aspect, but how we learn and how we are using what we learn to apply to what we do. And that's not just in medical education, in my opinion, it's everywhere. So for me, I'm looking at it from three perspectives. Number one, as an educator, obviously I'm looking at education. And I look at how am I using generative and augmented AI in undergraduate classrooms for my healthcare administration major students that all want to become hospital CEOs. How am I using it in graduate medical education? And then at the higher level, how are we seeing it used and how can we use it in medical schools for medical education? The biggest change that I think that is going to come down the pipe, and my research is starting to work on this, is the creation of AI tutors. And this AI tutor will be assigned to a medical student the day they are accepted and they decide to go to this medical school. And this tutor will be with them until they graduate. And the tutor is fully capable because it understands the entire curriculum within the medical school and this particular student's path. So when the student needs assistance, instead of trying to find a tutor or a buddy or an advisor or someone or a professor, they can just go right to their tutor and say, I just don't get this. I'm stuck. And what I love about augmented AI is that it will understand where this student is stuck, because if they were stuck before, it will remember where they were stuck before and help them get out of that. And the way I see that happening is through the use of analogies. By using the correct prompts within the different AI bots and create analogies for students to understand critical and synthetic concepts, it allows them to change their mindset as to how they are learning. So I really see a big difference going on the educational side. Certainly on the business side, we are seeing huge collaboration across our university, where other schools, our Conservatory of Music, for example, has come to the business school and said, we need some help understanding this AI. How can we use it to make our students better? Our concern is we don't want our students in the Conservatory of Music that are becoming writers to use AI to write their music for them. How do we stop that? How do we use AI in the classroom to augment, not replace, those important critical thinking and synthesis skills? AI tutors can also provide individualized learning experiences related to quizzing students, knowledge gaps, flashcards, all the things that we know, either through pedagogy or andragogy, is effective to help people learn. The overall big picture here is that this thing is going to change everything. It's going to be a game changer. As we heard Matt Lewis say, all the professional associations, everybody's getting on board. We know that President Biden came out with an executive order. That is only the very beginning of what we are going to see, because I'm looking at it, of course, only from a healthcare education standpoint, but we look at what's happening with AI and what it's able to do from a disinformation standpoint. And there are legitimate ethical and legal concerns that we have, and we have to keep those in mind and make sure that we are on top of those as we continue to progress.
Wow. That's fantastic, David. Thanks so much for that. I just real quick, because I know I'm getting poked that we're getting tight on time, but do you envision a day where like generative AI, I mean, I guess students, educators, professors, and especially in the continuing education realm as well, can utilize Gen AI to kind of identify their own learning needs and curate content to address those needs?
Absolutely. And we're seeing it now that I see these 6 steps as it comes to dealing with the students and this virtual AI tutor that I was talking about. So I will very quickly go through these steps. Number 1 is knowledge assessments. We got to start with a baseline to understand where the student is, and the AI needs to understand the beginning point of that student. We then go to personal content creation. We then have contextual learning, where AI will generate simulated cases and virtual patients for that student based on where that student is within their learning. We then have spaced repetition, where once the student learns, now we re-quiz them, make sure that they have got that particular concept locked in, and they can move on to the next one. We also have interactive dialogue, which to me is the hidden gem of augmented and generative AI. Interactive dialogue where I don't need, as Matt said, to worry about Python or coding, because that's not what I do. I need to talk to AI to help me generate solutions related to medical education. And then the last one is evaluating the learning gains. Anybody in education knows feedback is absolutely critically important so we can make the system better going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Really appreciate that.
I have a question for you, David. I'm wondering if you mentioned the tutor, that would be with the student the whole time. Is that something that's currently happening? I might have missed that it's currently happening, or something that you're moving towards.
We're moving towards. We do not currently have a full generated AI tutor yet. We are still using people for those needs, but that's changing very, very quickly as we are learning what AI can do.
Yeah, I know. It was like Saul Kahn, I think, of Khan Academy, was talking about the democratization of the availability of this and the democratization of tutoring, and everybody can afford it as long as you have an internet access and stuff. So very interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great. Thanks. All right, Dr. Soleas. So Terry, I know your objective is to focus on ethics and implementation of AI in health professions education. So maybe you can walk us through that.
Sure can. I did want to field one of the questions I saw in the chat so far. So Eva Bisel's question about AI tools and developing individual learning plans. AI actually, I think, might actually have the promise to fulfill adaptive mastery learning in this case. What I see within, what I think is so powerful, and I'll flip it to ethics in a second, is that an AI is able to look over data set. Let's assume that we fed it your scores on various quizzes. We can tell which questions you got right, which questions you got wrong. But what if we also give it access to the learning records in terms of how long did you spend in looking over a specific topic? Have you read this particular topic in the readings? Did you access it within the modules? If we can feed AI this kind of information, it will be able to go and say, well, Terry, you didn't answer that Krebs cycle question correctly. Here are the different sections of modules you might want to take a closer look at to prepare for any other questions you might have on that. It actually can keep track of it in a way that, simply put, we wouldn't have the resources to do with human power. So we'll need to use human intelligence and artificial intelligence together to go about solving that particular issue, because someone has to tell the AI what to care about. Because otherwise we're going to have AIs telling us all that we don't know how to use commas, and that's not going to help us a very lot. We already know we don't know how to use commas. So when we flip over to talking about the ethics of AI, well, I often find myself in a situation where I'm thinking back to, has our reach exceeded our grasp? Truthfully, with AI in this case, AI has opened up all kinds of new possibilities that we don't truly have the ability to we don't have the ability to truly fathom. We don't have the ability to hold on to all of those different kinds of considerations and all the different kinds of outcomes from using AI. So has someone gone and said, is AI going to make the world more unethical or not? Or how are we going to be able to tell what AI and the providence of what AI's knowledge actually would be? We can ask ChatGPT for just about any question. It'll try and answer it for us. There are specific blocks for ones that we don't. But how do we know those answers are right? Where did that knowledge come from? Did this actually come from sources that we can actually validate? Then there's also the ethics of how is it actually used in our CPD programs and in our undergraduate programs. Are we trying to be the person and the faculty member who banned computers and said, you're not allowed to use computers in my space? Well, there's all kinds of different considerations that come out of that. For example, are we banning people from using the assistive technologies that accommodate them to higher education? Are we going to be the type of person that says you're not allowed to use the internet? Well, guess what? You're not training people for reality then. The reality is the internet exists. The reality is AI exists. Anybody who goes and says you're not allowed to use AI in my class, number one, that's speaking quite a bit for, number one, I'd be asking, why is this person banning AI? What is it that they're afraid of? Are they afraid that the AI is going to make them no longer able to make the students play their game? Is that the problem? Is the problem is, oh, no, you'll be able to synthesize and put these together too easily. You'll get too good of a grade in my class. Doesn't that kind of speak to how they are assessing? That tells me an awful lot more about the person who's in charge of the class than it is the person who's trying to use the AI. AI exists, and it creates and it solves a problem. That being said, I can understand the need for people to understand how to put together a coherent sentence. But to actually use an AI to do your homework for you, to actually write, and like, let's assume that I assigned an essay and I want 850 words on the importance of ethical conduct in the health professions. And somebody goes and says, ChatGPT, please write me 850 words on ethical practice within health professions. And they go and they submit that blind. Chances are, without any editing, that essay is not going to do very well. What I do want to do is have somebody who would use ChatGPT to go through and edit it. Because if they go through and they edit it to the point where it's passable, they haven't done any of the remembering or the understanding that I might have looked for, but they've done the evaluation, which is a higher level of skill. That's a better use of human intelligence than it is getting them to write one set of, to write the essay itself and then have to go and evaluate it. Yeah, they've skipped a step here or two. They've augmented themselves by using the AI, but the real skill in writing isn't the actual writing. It's the editing, it's the focusing, it's the harnessing. AI can't do that yet. That's still human intellect that does that one. That's where we go from using AI to replace a human act to augmenting a human act. And that's what I think we need to be focused on. So the ethics in this, I think, cut both ways, both in terms of maybe there are people in the world that don't want AI to go and do what a human could do because like, it's going to replace a human job. Well, it's also going to create an AI. It's also going to create a job for a human in AI at this point. It's not so much as that it's coming for our jobs. It's going to result in a different allocation of jobs or professions or focuses within health professions education. The ethical considerations cut both ways. That's my closing message.
Excellent. Thanks, Terry. I appreciate that. I just harken back to my days teaching years, long time ago. We were still assigning the kids to, go read an encyclopedia. And I remember getting a computer in our classroom where they could utilize it for research. But I was a believer that, hey, use the resources that you have available to you, that you're aware of, that you know of, to kind of get the answers. If I'm asking you to explain something in physics, if you find the real learning is in that you can find the resources and put them to use. And so I kind of feel the same thing with AI, but the from an ethical standpoint there. So a lot of agreement. A quick question that I have for you, and then there's one from Suzanne Murray as well. We'd like to ask, but I'm not sure if it's ethics or not, but there's been the news headlines and the news bulletins lately have been that the new applications of ChatGPT aren't doing as well on the medical exams, or they're returning information that is misinformation or that is wrong. And I realize it's a function. There's more information that it's gathering from, that it's being trained on. So I guess from an ethical standpoint, or just from a compliance standpoint, like if people are using AI and those in their work, who's responsible for making sure that it's accurate, unbiased, not misinformation, but useful information, those sorts of things?
It's a great question, Daniel. One of the things that I've noticed is that AI has come out of its sandbox a little bit. It's come out of its perfectly curated, contained sandbox. It's now drawing on information that isn't as carefully curated, and now we're seeing some of the limitations of AI. AI will spew what it is fed, which is why if we think back to the first real exposure people got to AI was an AI tweeting thing that Microsoft created called Tay Tweets, which for the record was brilliant for about 15 minutes. And then it started being fed horrific, racist, abusive, and exclusive content from people talking to it and playing games with it, truthfully. They were going and doing this, and they managed to make an AI racist in about 25 minutes, truthfully. When you no longer have as careful control of what an AI is fed and the information that it is consuming, it starts to drift a little bit. We're noticing that AI has a tendency to try to be more specific, which goes against the programming that initially something like ChatGPT or any of the other large language models would have had. They tend to give general advice and general guidance on this. The more specific they get, the more likely they are to be wrong. So they're programmed to play it safe. Ask it for, so I went and I asked an AI yesterday, what is the best way for me to compliment my wife? Truthfully, I asked ChatGPT this, and ChatGPT came back to me with communication is key. You should speak to their strengths on this one. Now, I told the AI a little bit about my wife and then asked it to go and do this. It played it safe. It went general. The minute we try to get more specific, you notice an AI starts to have gaps, it starts to drift, and it starts to no longer meet its mandate as carefully. Now, in terms of who's ultimately responsible, if you blindly use what an AI gives you, you're ultimately responsible. You're the one who is submitting it to an assignment. We don't sue car makers for people being bad drivers. It's ultimately the responsibility of a person using an AI for the action that they undertake on the advice of the AI. There's still a human element. There's still a human responsibility. Now, our AI company is obviously morally responsible and soon to be probably legally responsible for what they get, for what advice they give to a human, sure. But the human who carries out an act informed by an AI, who augments themselves for better or for worse with what an AI tells them, is ultimately responsible for the action that they take.
I mean, Terry, it just gets back to that critical thinking skill, right? I mean, for people to get this information back, whether you're looking at it from a book or you're looking at it from, ChatGPT, you need to have some critical thinking going on and being able to determine, does this sound right or does it sound really conflated or maybe hallucination or something like that, as they're calling it.
Indeed, hallucination is what it's called when an AI when an AI convincingly gives you false information that is absolutely dead wrong on this one.
Yeah.
It is incredible the difference between what we intend AI to do and what it is going to end up doing and how we are going to use it. We imagine that AI would be used for the most noble of purposes, but we can already see AI is being used for some not so noble purposes. AI has the ability to take probably the snippets of the words that I've gone and said so far and create a deep fake of me that would convincingly tell you horrific things out of the voice of because somebody wants to do this with me for political or for social reasons for it. AI has to be used ethically, and we have to be so mindful of its use.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dale.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think a lot of that gets to what they're calling now prompt engineering, right? Which is getting the right information into it in a way that is very specific and very defined to kind of help it along. I mean, there's a number of courses out there and stuff now that we can take with regards to how to prompt an AI to get what you're looking for, really.
So great. Well, speaking of that, Dale, so I know you bring a lot of experience and personal interest as well as professional in terms of utilizing generative AI. And so I think, can you take a couple of minutes maybe and kind of walk us through how it might apply from a your experience as a pharmaceutical company, or in utilizing, or just as an organizational level, how we can incorporate generative AI into the our work functions, and specifically as it applies to CPD and IME.
Yeah. Well, in full disclosure, I've been out of the pharmaceutical industry for about 3 years, a little less than 3 years. But I was involved with a project at BMS where we were working with IBM Watson, and a company that was developing IBM Watson, to take a look at all the information that we had within the grant proposals that were coming. I mean, there were a lot of great needs assessments that were done. There's a lot of great outcomes that we received from the various different programs that we would get into our systems. And a lot of times they just got stuck into the system. But really what we wanted to do, and we helped to create this program that we could query. So we would basically, like what they do with generative AI, is we would drain the system with all the stuff that we have in terms of the outcomes, the needs assessments, and such that we have as a pharmaceutical company. A lot of the advisory boards, a lot of the information that comes in through medical affairs could be phase 4 trials, it could be medical information requests, it could be advisory board summaries. So we basically would bring this all in and then be able to query it and have the analytics be done on the overall outcomes. And are we actually moving the needle? I mean, that's one of the big questions that we had as a pharmaceutical company, was what, is our education having any impact? And that's why a lot of pharma companies go towards the higher level outcomes, Moore's levels outcomes, because they want to be able to say that we've actually changed behavior. It's one of the things that marketers in pharmaceutical companies know very well, is you want to change behavior. And so, and we were always one that had, actual data that we could use. And so we were using in artificial intelligence, IBM Watson at the time. Things have progressed so much now. I imagine that it's going to be just getting better. And I saw that from Matt Lewis's presentation, that MAPS has a very specific, policy with regards to that. And so hopefully I'm going to go take a look at that and see what they're doing, and maybe see if I can get involved there.
Super. All right. Well, thanks, Dale. I appreciate that good practical application of it. And I mean, there's so much more we could talk about and explore in this, but just kind of looking at the clock. There was one question that came through a little while ago. I think, Kim, it was in response to your presentation. So do you have examples for kind of guidelines or open sources that could be used as a blueprint, is the question. Does that resonate with you?
Are you talking to me, Daniel?
Yeah.
You mean for how it could be used in educational courses?
I think so. Yeah. The question,
well, I know Terry might be able to answer that, because of the modules that we've built through CPD. Might be a good blueprint, Terry.
All right, Daniel, I got distracted by some shiny in one of the chats. What was the question?
So do you have examples for guidelines or open sources that could be used as blueprint?
Sure can. So blueprint in terms of for integration into education, there are tons of good ones. So one of the frameworks that I would be looking at is called the RAT framework. So replication, amplification, or transformation, that you might be thinking of. So how is AI currently being instituted? So for example, is AI currently replicating human function? Is it amplifying human function, or is it transforming human function in this way? Well, for the moment, when I ask AI to write me an 850 word about why Professor Sears is my favorite human ever, and it goes and it writes it, well, it doesn't have the information to actually go and write that essay particularly effectively. But if I give it some more knowledge, it would be able to at least do a passable thing, and then I would have to carry it over the finish line in terms of actually having it transform my practice. Does it actually change the way that I work? There are lots of different kinds of guidelines. You might also consider Rogers' diffusions of innovations in terms of thinking about where people are going to be when they try to institute AI. Are they going to be one of the folks who's an early pioneer of it? Are they going to be folks that are going to be in the late majority, or are they going to be the folks that are the laggards which are the folks that think about it the very last, the folks that are languishing, that are the last to go and embrace something, the denialists, as it were, for it. Maybe in this case, we'll call them Luddites because maybe they don't want to particularly go about using that. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that they're not going to avail themselves of an opportunity to augment themselves, and they might find themselves outcompeted.
Well, as a part of the Innovathon that we did as a part of the Futures Forum earlier this year, the North America team actually did some focus groups on with physicians and with patients. And Terry, to your point, the physicians were very much well, we'll use it in simulation, we'll use it in training, that's okay. But, with regards to, impacting patients and stuff like that, they were much less willing to accept AI. Now, again, this was a year ago. So, I mean, I suspect, as we saw from Matt Lewis, that things have changed quite significantly since then because of generative AI, ChatGPT, and all of the buzz that we have around this right now. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Dale, I did want to address one of the points that you've got there, that is the use of it and whether we should be using AI or not. If an AI is able to recognize a condition sooner than a physician would be, it would be unethical for us not to use it, right? If it's able to do something better than a human would, and the only thing stopping us from using it is our pride or our fear, that's denying the highest of quality healthcare to someone in this way. So in this way, AI, in the spaces where it is superhuman, and there are only a few, it's, to me, unethical not to use AI.
Yeah.
Well said. I think there's just one of the participants, Terry, asked if we could write down, I guess, in the chat here, the name of the guidelines. So I don't know if there's a specific resource we can provide.
I was mostly discussing in terms of paradigms for integration of AI into education on this one, but in terms of some specific open-minded guidelines, I'll have to do a little bit more thought on that one and then send it along, maybe out to the game listserv.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, well, with that, I think we will turn this back over to Aaron, our moderator, as we're getting close to the end of our session today.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and really want to thank all of the panelists, our keynote speaker. This has been so insightful. We've learned a great deal, and I know I'm going to take back a lot of these teachings of the work that I do. Richard, if you can put up, thank you, way ahead of me. So actually, I think Terry, you wanted to speak on this really quickly, if you have a second.
Sure do. So in terms of what some of the framework, in terms of like, how do we actually take AI from being buzzwordy and being something that and something that we hear about, and we're hearing all the time that it's a game changer. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean that it is a game changer? How does it work? What are the actual, what's the language of AI and what are the ethics of AI? We actually worked with, Kim was one of our speakers, as were a bunch of our other folks from around Canada and the world, really, in terms of putting together what I think is a pretty comprehensive artificial intelligence and healthcare course. Now, I'm biased. I'm from Queens, and I helped put this one together. I also accredited it for the Royal College and CFPC, as well as for the American Medical Association and others, for folks to be able to use it. But I've put together what I think is a pretty compelling course. There are other great ones too. There are ones from Stanford. There are ones from elsewhere. I will say for ours is self-assessment. It's designed to help you change your practice and consider the different kinds of ways that you can integrate AI into the way that you interact with healthcare, medical education, and indeed with AI in general for it. So my gratitude to GAME for letting me go and make a little bit of a plug for that. And I have to acknowledge my biases on that as one of the course's creators.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Terry. Really, really appreciate that. And
we popped the link on into the chat. I'll pop it in again for folks who are interested.
All right. So make sure you're checking into the chat for that. And just to close, again, just really want to thank everyone for being here, for your insight. The Q&A sessions went well. The chat has been amazing, a lot of different perspectives. And again, just thank you for taking time out to essentially learn with us. Really do appreciate that. So if you have a moment, please take out your phone, or maybe you can tell your AI chat GPT to do it. And please scan the QR code here, just so you can evaluate the webinar. How can we improve moving forward? And any topics you're interested in, please let us know. It's only 7 questions, so it shouldn't take too much time. But we'll leave this up. But with that being said, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you again to all our panelists. Thank you to our keynote, Matt Lewis, and thank you to everybody that has been here throughout this whole webinar. And thank you to the Futures Innovation Committee. Hope you have a great one.